Hello class, welcome to our class, unit GEM 5107 for postgraduate students. And my name is Agnes, and I'll be taking you through the unit proposal writing skills. The unit proposal writing skills is a prerequisite to research methodology. And the assumption that we make at this point is that you have been introduced to research methodology, but somewhere along the way we shall be able to recap a few things so that we move together as far as the course is concerned. Now, when we look at the unit, we would want you to be conversant with our course outline, or what we have prepared for you as far as the course outline is concerned. And of course, we have a few things that we need you to keep in mind as far as what the learning outcomes of the unit are. One, we would want to identify researchable problems. Note, when we talk about problem, research problem, we do not mean problem as it is. We mean the phenomenon that does intrigue the researcher at this time in point. We also want to demonstrate, you to be able to demonstrate clear understanding of research methodology. As I mentioned earlier, we expect that you have been exposed to research methodology. And this unit, as I said earlier, is a prerequisite. So when we discuss research methodology, we would also want to talk in terms of, or you to be conversant with the ethical considerations. As every discipline we talk about, ethics is key. We need to take care of the people we are handling and the people giving us information. That we shall be able to discuss again at length. We would also want to talk about research designs that are in social research. Note, this is education, and in education research we also have, it is also referred to as in social research, and therefore we would expect our students to be able to be conversant with the designs and the changing times. And of course we look at collecting data, the methods that we use to collect data, and how to analyze it eventually. Now, when we look at our course outline, what do we expect to cover in the entire course? We expect to have definition of research, which I know by now many of us know what it is. Definition of a concept paper, the components of a concept paper, very key, we shall be looking at that as well. Research proposal, that is the entire course, how to come up with a sound research proposal. We also would want to look at the purpose and qualities of a research proposal as it is. We would also want to look at, in our course, we shall be able to define a research topic. What is a research topic? What is a researchable topic? And how to identify one? What are the keywords that we look out for? What are the aspects that make a good research topic, and how to formulate one. We shall be discussing how to formulate a research topic in the sense that what are these components that are expected in a research topic. One of them, of course, we know are variables, major and independent and dependent. And of course, we look at the challenges that come in. We define the topic, the qualities of a good research title, and the challenges encountered. Note, we keep talking about challenges because when we discuss these challenges and we are able to formulate these challenges and identify these challenges, makes the whole process very simple. Remember, research is a process, and therefore we should be able to make it as simple and as smooth as possible. Now, when we look at the other bit that we shall be able to look at is the title page, the preliminary pages basically. The preliminary pages are the pages when you open a research document the very first pages you begin to see. And even before we open the document, the cover page is part of the preliminary pages. So at the very beginning, we talk about the preliminary pages. These pages include the declaration page, the dedication page, acknowledgement, table of content, list of abbreviations, etc., etc., plus, of course, the abstract. Now, when we look at what happens, we shall also be able to look at what happens in chapter 1. Chapter 1 comes immediately after the preliminary pages. And the chapter 1 has several subtitles or several subheadings, if you may call them that way. But then we look at what do we look at as far as the chapter 1 is concerned. These are just a little highlight on what we expect in the entire course. We have the introduction of the topic. You introduce your chapter, and this chapter is usually known as the introduction chapter. Now, this introduction chapter, immediately after that, we have an introductory bit where the researcher introduces the chapter. A brief overview of what the chapter is all about. That section is followed by background of the study. Some people will say background to the study. Either or is acceptable. So we say background of the study. Here, this researcher is expected to give a background, a chronological flow of how the topic came to be. The history, a little bit, where it came from, how it has developed, and where we are. So that is what is expected when we talk about background to the study or of the study. Immediately after background of the study, we have the statement of the problem. And the statement is usually where the researcher gives the knowledge gap. The knowledge gap, the social need that has prompted or makes this research important. Why are we engaging in this research? What is the social gap? What is the knowledge gap? So in so doing, here the researcher should look at what other people have done, empirical studies, and explain where the gap is. We shall be looking at this again in detail. Very key, and mark that one as a very key section. Then purpose of the study as it is of course the reason as to why the study is taking place, and is one I call the easiest to do. Very easy to do, because you simply say this, the study seeks to do, you give your topic or the study or the phenomenon that you're looking at, and at the end of the day we have our purpose. The objective of the studies come in at immediately after the purpose of the study. Sometimes when you look at different people, they say the research questions should come first. But of course, we can also have objectives come first. To some extent, that section is a bit, is exchangeable, interchangeable. We can have the research questions first, depending on who is looking at your work, and we can have objectives of the study first. But for now, let's have objectives coming first. So objectives of a study, we shall also be looking, and I hope people remember how to state an objective as covered in research methodology. And then, of course, once we have the objectives, we shall be looking at the research questions. The research questions that will be able to guide the study. That is followed by limitations of the study. Remember, we are still in chapter 1, limitations of the study. The limitations here are constraints that will affect the study in one way or another, and perhaps the researcher might not have control over them. So it is up to the researcher to think, sit down reason, read other people's work, see what they have come across, see what challenges they encountered, and see how, and be able to see how to mitigate so that these limitations do not affect your study. Then we look at delimitations of the study rather. The delimitations of the study, these are the geographical boundaries, the limitations in terms of the population, who are the targeted people, where will the findings be generalized, if they are going to be generalized, or where will the conclusions be anchored on. So we talk about delimitations of the study. Every study that is done must be useful to one person or other people or groups of people besides the researcher alone. And therefore, significance of the study come into the picture. We ask ourselves again, this is a question that a researcher should be able to ask himself or herself at any particular point. Who will benefit from the findings of the study? Who will be the consumers of the findings of this particular study? And the consumers are the people you talk, or the groups of people, or the groups of organizations you talk about at that point in significance of the study. The assumptions of the study are items, or are come in after. At that point, we make assumptions that perhaps we shall be able to get the data that we require, that perhaps our participants will be able to give us true information, or will be able to get information. And those are the assumptions you make. What are you assuming? That this will happen or the other will happen. So we look at it in that particular point at 1.9. Then theoretical framework comes in after assumptions. What do we say about theoretical framework? Here, in any research study, should be anchored under or within a theory. Now, in theoretical framework, we do not just talk about one theory. You can have one theory that is related to your study. You can have two theories. Then when we have two theories, then we are triangulating at that point. And therefore, it is necessary for a researcher to be able to identify a theory that is related to their study. And therefore, theoretical framework comes in. We shall also be looking at that in details as we move on. The conceptual framework, this is where the researcher prepares a conceptual understanding. You prepare a framework under which all your study is anchored again. And this section requires a researcher to prepare a diagrammatic representation of the independent variables, and the intervening variables. At this point, the researcher should be able to understand the relationship within or between or among the variables that are in play in that study. And finally, we talk about, in chapter 1, finally, we talk about operational definition of terms. This is where the researcher is expected to define terms that are playing key role in the study, but do not conform to the dictionary meaning. In chapter 2, we talk about literature review. We review literature. Remember, in research methodology, one of the key things that is put across as a researchable topic is where we say a researchable topic must have enough literature to address it. So this is where the literature comes in, that we have enough literature so that we can review it. Now, we want to know what is this literature. These are things we shall be defining as we move on. And then the purpose of the literature, why do we need to carry out this literature? It is of what use? And therefore we shall be looking at that, and of course the sources and the steps followed as far as literature review is concerned. And our chapter 3 of the research proposal is the research design and methodology. Now, the research design and methodology section is the one that covers research designs. And we have several designs, and I'm sure people will recall this. We shall call upon you to recall this from your research methods class, that these research designs, we have 3 types: the qualitative ones, the quantitative ones, and the new kid in the block, the mixed methods. The MMR captures both qualitative and quantitative. We shall also be looking at that and reviewing that at length. Location of the study is key because we want to know where is this study taking place. Remember, in 001, and we shall review that again, that is in research methodology, one of the key things that must have been mentioned to you or was covered is a research topic must have a place function. And the place function gives us the location of the study. Therefore, we shall be looking at location of the study, and that will usher us to the target population. Remember, when we talked of delimitations in chapter 1, we said the study is delimited in terms of location, in terms of the place. So this is where we are talking about, and we also said that it is also delimited in terms of the target population. This is where the researcher explains who the target population of that particular study is and how they came about that target population. Here the researcher is expected to describe that population in totality so that it ushers the researcher to sample and sampling procedures. Once the population is described in totality or fully, then the researcher is able to explain how the sample is arrived at and the sampling procedures that will be followed. Just to recap a little bit on sampling procedures, remember there are 2 types. There's a probability and non-probability sampling procedures. And of course, we come back after we have picked our sample and explained our sampling procedures, then we talk about research instruments. The research instruments are many. There are those research instruments that are specific for qualitative designs. Remember, we are picking a design here. The study will require that you pick a design. Therefore, the design that you pick should be able to tell you the sampling procedures that you have and the instruments that you use. So the instruments are those. We have instruments for qualitative studies, we have instruments for quantitative studies, and for MMR, that is mixed methods research, we expect a mixture of the 2, depending on the mixed method or the mixed design that you pick. And then data collection procedures, we shall also discuss that in details. You have prepared your instruments, you have piloted them, you have field tested them, you're comfortable, your research instruments will be able to give you the information that you seek for. And therefore, that the instruments we want to discuss, how do they get to your participant and how do you get them back? And that is what we discuss at this level, data collection procedures. Now, the data analysis procedures, these are the sections or the areas we look at the data that you have collected. Remember, we collect both qualitative and quantitative data, or qualitative data and quantitative data. And therefore, you have to discuss what we will discuss here, what operations we shall apply for qualitative data and what operations we shall apply for quantitative data. So that means here we are talking about our analysis. How will we analyze? Is our data numerical? If it is numerical, then we apply statistical operations. If our data is not numerical, if our data is in words and phrases, descriptive data, then we explain how we are going to analyze that data, thematic headings, etc., etc. So we need to be very careful at this point. We need to be sure what kind of data we have collected and how that data is going to be analyzed. And finally, we look at the ethical considerations. As we said, every section and every sector has its ethics. For researchers, we also have our ethics. And therefore, we ask ourselves, what are we going to do? Are we going to allow our participants take part in our study voluntarily? Are we going to allow our participants ask for permission if they are minors, vulnerable groups, etc., etc.? If they give us, if someone gives you confidential information, are you going to keep it confidential, or are you? Those are the things that we are going to discuss at this point in time. And therefore, when we look at our lesson, we know that the course outline, the entire course outline, is what we expect to cover at this point. We also expect you to talk about your references. Remember, in any research document or in any research proposal that you put across, there are references and there are appendices. The appendices are where we attach our research instruments. And therefore, that follows in a separate page, it follows the ethical considerations. Remember, when we talk about our references, we mean the references must be followed or must be arranged alphabetically. Again, that should not worry anybody. We shall be discussing that in details. Now, that is the entire document. But there's something else I wanted us to look at before we get out of the course outline. What we refer to as trustworthiness, validity, and reliability. The data that we collect must be trusted. With the findings that we put across, someone should be able to trust what we have put across. And therefore, we look at it and ask ourselves, how do we ensure this trustworthiness? Again, that will be an area that we shall be looking at in details once we begin our proposal writing process. The data, it's in terms of data, it's in terms of the instruments that we use as far as this is concerned. Now, we will also look at how, when you write your entire document, how do you present your report? We shall also be looking at that in details. We shall be looking at the title pages. How does it look like? Preliminary pages, chapter 1, 2, 3, 4. Chapter 4 is not part of the proposal writing skills, but it is necessary for us to mention it to you, and we shall keep mentioning this to you, that chapter 4 comes in after data has been collected. It is where you present your data analysis and your findings at the same time. And then we have the chapter 5, which gives us the summary, conclusions, and the recommendations that the research has put forward or has put across. Now, that is simply what we expect to do in the entire course, and thank you very much.
We are in a digital era, and Mount Kenya University knows this. The following are the steps to follow so as to complete your online application. Download the application form from the website www.mku.ac.ke. Attach copies of your academic certificates and ID. Pay the application fees via M-Pesa pay bill number 270988. Your ID is the account number. 2,000 shillings is the charge for a postgraduate. You can also deposit in the bank accounts provided on the website. Then email all the above to apply@mku.ac.ke.